Welcome back to the Berg podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And we are talking about what keeps us strong, right? And Dan, you mentioned it, and it kind of boils down to the core of things. You know, the trunk of the tree, the center mass of the body, whatever it might be. And just sort of talking through why that's important and how to keep that the focus.
Yeah, and what to focus on, right? Like what started me down this road was focusing on the core of what makes you go, of what matters, of what supports you, of whatever qualifier you want to put on it. But the reality is, what I'm talking about is that too many times we get distracted and we get focused on trying to address, fix, or interact with the outlying piece that's drawing attention, right? Like sort of the squeaky wheel gets the grease sort of thing. You know, like you deal with the things that you have to deal with because they're put in front of you, not because it's what's most central to the critical path of the movement of the organization or of anything of your life. And Ford sort of brought up, compared it to like working out and maintaining yourself, physically, that the core of your body is everything. A lot of times you look at you look at people who lift a lot and you might see they have big arms, they have big legs. But when you see like the actual contests with the strongest people, it's core. I mean, they're barrels, you know what I mean? Because the core of their body is just so strong that it enables them to do a lot of things with pure strength. And it's sort of translated with that too, that if you focus on the things that matter, whether that be the people or the jobs, and it all ties together. So I think it's a viable conversation we could have and it be a positive one. And that's what I was hoping when I sort of brought it up.
Yeah, certainly. Something you said there made me think about a thing you have on your blackboard in your office, and blackboard, whiteboard.
It's clear board. I'm not sure what color it is.
It's black.
It's black, right? Yeah, it's black, dry erase board. And you and I have had the conversation a number of times, and I actually forget where this originates, but the urgent but not important versus important.
The Eisenhower matrix.
Yeah.
So it's Dwight D. Eisenhower. Supposedly, he's credited with popularizing. I don't know that he came up with it, but yeah. So things are either urgent or not urgent, and either important or not important. And the principle being, if it's urgent and important, then you need to deal with it right then. If it's important but not urgent, it's something that you have to schedule. If it's urgent but not important, it is something that should be delegated to someone who can deal with it because it needs to be dealt with, but may not be important enough to rise to being your responsibility. And if it's neither important nor urgent, you shouldn't deal with it at all.
Right. Shouldn't even be on the list.
It shouldn't even be on the list. So. I struggle with that last box a little bit because I feel like if it shouldn't be on the list, why am I making it part of the list? But it's being intentional, to use one of your words, that if you realize that, you don't actually want anything in the box. So what I've done with that is I write a couple quotes and I change them out depending on, how I'm feeling, what's going on, of different things, and sort of put them in that box, not because they belong there, but just because, for a while I had standing meetings that I didn't want to have, just meetings that were not productive that I have because I scheduled the meeting.
Sure.
But I took that off because there's some meetings I need to have. Like I need to touch base with my team, at least once a week for me. I feel like I touch base with them individually on a much more frequent basis. But once a week, I got to get together with them and the only way to do that is to schedule it. I can't just say, hey, when we're all here, like that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I took standing meetings off of things I shouldn't do. But yeah, I like the Blackboard thing and it works for me. And it tries to keep me focused on that, on doing the things that matter, that have the most impact to the company.
Yeah. I have an alert that goes off every morning that says choose what's important. And it's like sort of like a morning reminder for me, like as I set the tone for my day to prioritize the things that are important and let the things that are unimportant sort of either filter out or get reassigned.
Yeah.
But I also think, though, the interesting piece, maybe why there is still that box, it's all contextual, right? So, like, say you have 4 things and you put them in your 4 boxes, but the next day, maybe something that was in one of the boxes that was a lower in priority maybe becomes a higher priority because the other thing has been taken care of. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, like, every time you relook at that,
Right.
Like I used to do this list thing. I used to have like just a legal pad and you write it down and everything. And then you just like strike out the things you get done. And then, but the ones that you didn't get done, all of a sudden get higher on the list the next day, you know, and like you just keep, and then at the end of the week, you see which items are not left. So it's interesting. It has a lot of context involved with it as far as like put your head down, get the things done that need to be done. And then maybe the things, you know, move up the list later, but it's more about right now, what is that thing? Not just, you know, if you looked at the 4 things, it's not like the thing's going to fall off in that 4th box, but it's that it's not going to happen right now because these other 3 things or 2 things are more important. Mm-hmm. And then once those are done, maybe when you get the next group to put in there, those 2 things that were not all of a sudden have a different box that they're going to fit into.
Right. That's true. I guess I didn't really, you know, I didn't think about it that way, but that does make a lot of sense because I similarly used to use the make a list and then strike it out. What did I get done? You know, task list. We talk about it at home in my personal life. I work really well with lists. If you give me a list of what you need to get done, I'll evaluate it, make some sense of it, and then work through that list. If you just tell me, hey, I'd like you to get these 10 things done, I may or may not get them done. They're not because they're not a priority to me.
Yeah.
But if you put them on a list, I sort of focus on them because I want to get through the list. I want to reach some sort of end, you know, and that's a conversation that we have both in the company and in my personal life. I talk about it a lot with Erin, that a lot of times I feel like she doesn't set achievable goals, right? That she says like, I want to get these 20 things done today. And it's like, okay, well, that's not going to like, you're not even out of bed and I'm telling you today's a failure. That's not going to happen. You need to set.
How's the conversation go over?
It usually doesn't go. It's actually in our relationship, it started to go better because Erin realizes that I'm not saying the things aren't important. I'm saying you need to, if you set goals that aren't achievable, you are frustrated by failure.
Yeah.
But your failure was not a failure. Like you succeeded. Like, so set a goal. But it was a struggle when I used to say it to her because I think it was a feeling that I was devaluing someone else's goals.
It was like offensive because she had established
she had established what needed to be done, right, in your mind. And need is like a subjective word, right? What needed to get done. And that's sort of the point of that Eisenhower thing is what needs to get done, what has to be done, but doesn't need to be done. You know what I mean? And sort of work your way back from that. And everything has to get done, right? Sure. Like in other words, one of the things we talk about a lot of times with the guys is one of the most important things a foreman has to do is get the hours in, right? Because if the hours aren't in, the guys don't get paid. You would think I would say the most important thing is that we get everything done so that we can bill. That's important at a certain point in the month when billing is due for that job or for us as a company. But you never make it to that point if you didn't pay the guys, because if the guys don't get paid, they're not going to show up. And if they don't show up, you're not going to get the work done. So it sort of becomes one of those things in my mind where you set goals and make the goals attainable. Now, it can be a stretch goal. You know what I mean? You could have 10 things on the list and you may not get them done, but you're trying, you know? And so, but I think what was in my head when I was thinking about this last night was, what happens is we make a list of we need to get these 5 things done. Mm-hmm. And then 4 things happen that are unfortunately neither important nor they are urgent and not important. It's something that came up that distracts you, but does not actually have any importance to what you're doing and will not impact you in the long run. It's just something that is going to happen. And we get sidetracked and we go jump and go work on that thing, trying to create change. And then other things fall through the cracks that we actually needed to get done that we had planned to do because we're focused on the other things. Mm-hmm. You know, so we let it take away from the core.
That's like the firefighting versus the, you know, because the other thing is too, that if you think about it is that, you know, a lot of this stuff, you know, lists, all these different things, but, sometimes people look at all of them and get overwhelmed because there's so many. And so not only is it the list, and, you know, depending if you use your matrix from Eisenhower, you just write numbers beside them on like which one is most important. But like, it's amazing. You're like, oh, we got all this to do. And it's like, all right, how do you eat an elephant? Bite at a time. Get one thing done. One thing leads to 2 leads to 3, 4, and all of a sudden you look back and you got it done. But if you focus all say 20 at the same time, it can be overwhelming that you have 20 things to do, but just start on 1 and then 2, then, you know what I mean? Like, so it's an interesting dynamic of how those tie together because of the fact that people sometimes just get overwhelmed by all this stuff that needs to get done. It's like, yes, it all needs to get done. But if we start and we get 1 done, that's only 19 left. Then there's 18 left. Then there's 17 versus like, I'm still focused on the 20 things and I didn't get any of them done because I did half of this and half of that and half of this and, you know, a quarter of this. Yeah. And so there's that like,
it spreads it too thin.
Yeah. Right? You're just trying to like, put your fingers in the dike and hold it back, where it's like, okay, we're just going to do one. You think about it. I was thinking back to the boat thing, but like, say you had 6 holes in your boat and you're trying to do all of them at the same time. None of them are going to get fixed. They're all going to be partially done. But if you get one completed and then 2, then 3, and you let the other ones go until you can get there, you could do the worst ones first or whatever the scenario is. When that one's done, there's no more water coming in at that spot, right? So it's that sometimes just slow and steady wins that race as far as versus like, oh my goodness, we got all this to do. Yes, we do. It's the summertime, the season's firing up. That's how it goes every year. I think that's another thing that's part of it is that like, even though we know it's going to happen every year, when you're in the middle of it, it feels like this is crazy. And it's like, yeah, but every year the same crazy happens.
Well,
and just how do you like, every time you do it, you just get more immune to that transition.
I sort of, I thought that it would be, I thought that by this point we would have sort of seen everything, right? Like we would have, in other words, the same thing can happen. It is always going to rain in spring. It is always going to be cold in the winter. It's always going to dry out in the summer, right? Like, you can have variations in the seasons, but for argument's sake, in the Northeast, that's what's going to happen. And the work is going to follow as such. They're always going to want their pads before winter, like it's always going to be the same. I think what throws us sometimes is that we get other things thrown in and then we're trying to deal with them. And I sort of thought that by this point we would have seen them all, but we haven't. Mm-hmm. And I feel like right now we're working through some things that are, some of the last things we're going to have to see and learn from and the team figure out. But the more we work through it and the deeper we get into being who we want to be as a team, as a culture, as a company, the more I look at it and I say, like, it really has to be about culture. It has to be about that every person that's here wants to be here. And that's probably never going to happen, right? But the more people I can get on the boat that want to be on the boat, and more than want to, they choose to be on the boat, right? Like now we talked about Boomerang employees, and we've had a few, recently over the past year or two that have come back that are valuable people that I was sad to see go, and I'm happy they came back.
Right.
And they're so productive because they want to be here. They have elected, not because they had to, not because it's the job that was open, because they elected to, because there's something that they feel like makes sense for them, that makes this the right place to be for them. And when you get that, the difference in how things work is so visible. No matter how stressed or how anything else is, they're more comfortable to have a conversation. They're more willing to communicate. They're okay to say, hey, this is not okay. They're okay to say, I need help. They're okay to say, this is great. They're okay to say, no, thank you and thank you. It's a better environment. And when you have people who are just with you because it's a paycheck, it's today, it's tomorrow, it's pays the rent. It's not that they're not productive. It's not that they're not good workers. It's just different, Mm-hmm. And I think as we grew and continue to grow and get to numbers, we hit little points where we have more or less of that. And I think that may actually have, the only thing that has more impact on us than that is if me or one of our estimating team does a bad job of bidding. That's the only way we can hurt ourselves worse than not having people who want to be here is by doing jobs we shouldn't do. And in my head, that was sort of the beginning of this conversation. It was, Herb Sargent had talked about the fact that they had reduced how much they were bidding and increased how much they were winning and were more successful.
Sure.
And it was such a striking dichotomy to hear because, okay, if you want to win more, you bid more, right? Like if you win at X percent, you bid more, you win more. And Herb took a completely different route and said, no, well, what if as a company, and I don't know that it was Herb himself, but Sargent,
his team,
his team looked at all the bidding and what they bid and how they bid it and said, you know what, if we actually focused on what we do well and where we're successful, we can bid less, be more successful in winning it, and give our team the work either in the place or in the style that they want to do, that they're good at, where they can succeed. And it's a crazy thought in terms of trying to do it, to shift your mindset to that. But if we can, and we can bid that way, and we can hire that way, and we can, operate as a culture that way, it'll be a lot happier place for everybody, because all of us are on the boat. We're all pulling in the same direction. And, you know, that's what makes things go. To stay with the sports analogy, Brian and I were talking that I watch very little sports anymore because I'm just too busy with family and my life choices, work, the girls, everything else. I should change that. I watch a lot of sports live in person with my girls. I don't watch much sports on TV anymore. But the Game 7 of the NHL was going to be on. I enjoy hockey. I played hockey a little bit. I like watching it. It's an amazing sport. They're super athletic, crazy what they can do on skates. They do things on skates that I can't do on my feet. And Florida was up 3-0 and ended up going to Game 7. So I was like, I'm going to watch this. Girls weren't around. I hadn't had time to do it. I was watching it. And after Florida won, what struck me was they never said they were the best team. Everyone that talked about it, including themselves, talked about the culture of that team, of who they built it around and what their idea was and their identity. And people that had been there since the trade deadline for 3 months felt like they'd been there 10 years. Like, it was culture. It was that they set a mindset from the very top of that organization, about 5 years ago, and said, we're not going to win the way we are. If we want to win, we got to be this other thing. Mm-hmm. They shifted, they became that thing, and the results followed. And if they had lost Game 7, it would have been a disaster, but it didn't change that they were in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup because they all bought in. And so it doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter if it's your family, if it's business, if it's sports. If you can get everybody pulling in the same direction, if everybody's on the boat, you're going to do better and you're going to feel better about it. And that sort of, that was my thinking as I look at our own team, to say, who's on the boat, who wants to be here, and let me focus on how I can help those people. Yeah. And then not worry about people who are, here because they're here. And that's not a knock on anybody. It's just, I want to try and focus my attention on the people who want to be here, on the jobs we want to win, on the clients we want to work for. And if I can do that, then hopefully the team can do it, with me, and we can be a better version of ourselves.
Yeah. Either of you ever read that book? It's going to escape me now because I'm trying to think of it. It's about the rugby team from New Zealand, the All Blacks.
I know which one you're talking about, but I don't know the name of it.
I did not read it.
And I forget the name of it. Is it called like Legacy, or the Legacy of the All Blacks, or something like that? But it's a really, I haven't finished it, so I have to acknowledge that. But I've read most of it, in part because of team building in sports, but also team building in other organizations. Life, exactly. And it deals with that a lot, like trying to figure out what it is that makes your team who they are in the locker room, or in the huddles, or in your meetings, usually dictates who they are away from those settings. So in sports, on the field, obviously, and yeah, it's just interesting. It's a lot of kind of what you're talking about here in regards to, like, it's got to be right at the heart, because if it's not right at the heart, then everything is an extension of that. It won't look right when you get to the fingertips. So, yeah.
No, it's true. I mean, I even think about it completely separate in terms of, my middle daughter Charlotte's soccer team had a really good season, and I'm friends with several of the parents, and they work out together, see each other outside of things, of the other teams, of the other highly competitive teams in the area. And these parents kept saying, we just don't understand. We are clearly the best team. Like, we're the most gifted. Now, whether they are or aren't, I'm not going to get into it. It's pretty narcissistic coming from a narcissist to say your kid's the best. But it is, I'm not denying that the parents that I'm talking about, their kids are amazing. They're very skilled, super technical. You see them on the field, they can play. Mm-hmm. And after they had lost, I think 6 times in a row to us over a course of 5 months, I said to them, thing is, your kids are really gifted, and you probably beat us 1v1, but this game isn't 1v1, and we're the better team because we play together better, because you guys are too busy trying to play 1v1 against us. And I think it was a striking realization for them that, like, wait a minute, we built this team. Because the kids didn't start out together. The parents put them together, thinking like, we'll take all these great technical skills and put them together. But it didn't work because it didn't work. And it didn't take any, they were a really good team.
Yeah.
But they just, at the critical moment, they lacked the thing they needed because they just didn't gel together, because they didn't. Now, over time, they could. And that's how you end up with these, super teams at any level. But it matters so much what the makeup of a team is, and what the culture is. You know what I mean? And it's crazy to think that, because it's, Ford, I sort of make it like equipment. Like if you need a D8 or, you know what I mean? You need a 349 or, a 490. If you need that machine, you need that machine. You can't say, well, it'd be better as if I had a couple really nice 39s. That would work great. It was like, no, it won't. For horsepower reasons, for other reasons, you needed this thing. But when you're building an equipment fleet on a job, you can't just say, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to load up and put a bunch of giant dozers there. I'm just going to put a bunch of 490s there. Like, well, no, you actually may need a 138 because you're going to have to dig something. You got to have a roller, or how are you going to compact this thing? Like, you can't have all the showy things. You need the right things in the right places, so the right pieces in the right places, doing the right thing. And that's how a job gets done.
Right.
And it doesn't matter, what it is, what you're doing. When you put together a team, you need everybody to want to be on the team and everybody to be willing to do their part. And I sort of drop back to that line of mine about do your job. That everybody's job is just as important. It doesn't matter if you're, the new guy who just showed up and you're laboring, or if you're the fine grade dozer operator that's been doing this for 30 years. At the end of the day, the job will not get done if you don't have all of the pieces you need.
I think a lot of excellent points there. One of the things that sort of always feels like we're chasing a little bit, I think internally at least, and I don't think it's unusual in construction. I don't think we're alone here, but is like teaching the extensions of your team to also hold those things valuable, and how they do that and what that looks like, right? Because I think you're saying a lot of great things. And if you had the time to build relationships individually with each one of our people on a daily, hourly basis, it probably would look different, right? Or the same thing when Ford started this, Ford was that guy, right? Ford built those relationships. A lot of them were friends and family from the beginning. And because of those connections, the team worked. And they were all moving the right direction for the most part, all trying to understand what they had to accomplish. And then the team grew, right? And slowly and over time. And now the team looks differently, but the same principles apply. And mostly at its heart, because of relationships and people who Ford knew acted like him or in a way that he thought was admirable, desirable, whatever it might be, or worked like him or his family or his friends, like it made sense. And now as that thing like continues to expand and continues to extrapolate and continues to grow, I think the thing we're always trying to keep up with and don't always have a good answer for is how do we get like the next generation, the next layer, the next level to be connected to that and to want to do it and to understand why we do it.
Well, and it's interesting too, because another guy that I know, he said he wanted to create briefcases that he could just hand to the next person and it would like go down. And it's so interesting because while that is true, that every time another layer of team comes in, you're working to build that again. So it's just a constant thing. You're never going to be finished at. It's just going to be forever. But the interesting thing is that some people, they might be here 3 months and they get it, right? Some other person might be here for 2 years, doesn't get it. Mm-hmm. It's just so truly interesting how that's a personal makeup. That's interest in being here, some of those factors. And you were talking about earlier, like, when you have more than 50%, they kind of are protecting what it is, right? Because they've been here, they buy into it. And then when you grow, you got to like rebuild that 51%, majority, because once you have that 51% majority, they're looking out for what they believe in as well as just the whole thing. And so, it's kind of interesting every time you go through it, you got to like, okay, reweed through the garden and kind of change it up to make sure that like the core is strong. I mean, that's the bottom line of how this thing started. I mean, this podcast started. It's the same thing. It's just that every once in a while, the core gets out of balance. You got to readjust. That's the fun thing is we get to talk about this stuff, and it's not theoretical, but it is the three of us in a room talking about it. And while that's wonderful, it is about the entire thing that doesn't get to be here on these podcasts with us and how they operate, because, we can have a great theory, but if we have to continually, I think that's the other thing is that, we were joking about the other day, but it's like 9,000 times someone has to hear something nowadays. It used to be like 9 or something like that. It's transitioned up a little bit, right? So like, if someone's like, boy, this is a constant theme in the podcast. It's a rinse and repeat. It's not that we're trying to repeat ourselves, but it's just that it needs to constantly be heard, constantly be discussed, constantly talked about, constantly shown. Because someone else was talking about the other day about like, how do you instill this stuff? It's consistency, right? Because if it's consistent, it's always at the center. It's not, migrating left, right, and center. It's the consistency. That is the only thing that you can do to really, truly build something. Because, if you flip, think about our Sixers, trust the process. They blew up whatever was working or not working to try something else just to go a different direction. That hasn't worked either, because they're constantly in search of whatever they're...
Right, they're missing the core thing, though. And I don't mean that as a person. They're missing
whatever it is. And they just keep floating to the newest, hottest idea, and then they move to the next one. They try and hire this guy and bring this guy, and then they just don't have that central theorem.
So Brian and I have talked about this, I think, and Ford, you said a few things there that really like trigger me to want to jump in, but it's part of the podcast. We've
trying to keep track of these.
Can I keep track and separate them? I won't be able to. But when you just said that, what I thought of, and Brian and I have talked about it, is my youngest brother was a good athlete, and at one point, a coach said he has everything, every skill that we want to see, but he doesn't have it.
Yeah.
It was the most frustrating thing, because it was like, well, what's it? Well, you know it. When you
Jeter
see it,
versus Alex Rodriguez.
right? When you see it, you know it. It doesn't mean you don't have the skill. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean you couldn't do it, but you just don't have it. And what is it? And I sort of, as when Brian was first talking and then Ford started to talk, the other thing I was thinking about is I'm going to do it even though it's just the three of us in a room. When was the last time you thought about how much you get paid? Right? Like, especially thought about how much you get paid as it relates to what you're doing, or to me, right? Like, when's the last time you thought about like, well, what I make compared to what Dan makes and how that relates, right? Like, I don't think about it. I don't think you think about it. I don't think Ford thinks about it.
July 8th, 2023.
Yeah. Right.
Like the last time I had my review.
Right. And you and I talk about this, that for me, like I always joke, right? And I say it's August 1st, though it should be July 1st, because I started working July 1st, but I just wasn't on the payroll because I was doing 2 jobs at once to try and make that transfer, which luckily we did because Steve left sooner than he was supposed to. Mm-hmm. But it's the most uncomfortable day of the year for me. Because it's a day when, if Ford chooses to do a review at that point, we're going to have to come in and we're going to have to talk about it. And I don't want to talk about it. It's not that I have lots of money and I don't need money. It's not that I don't want to negotiate with Ford and say like, hey, I think I'm worth more compared to, Bob Jones. It's not any of those. I don't want to talk about it. Because if this is about money, then I don't have it. Right. Now that's the tie-in for me. Then I don't have it. And we all need to make a living. We all need to get paid. We all need to pay our bills. And it's one of the first questions I ask when we interview people is, what do you need to feel comfortable? But the reason I ask it is not just to see if you fit into our pay scale. It's because if we can make that work, then we shouldn't have to talk about it again. Right. Because if eggs double in price, then yes, people need more money. But if Smith Excavating decides they want to pay somebody an extra $2 an hour, did you need the $2 an hour, or do you want the $2 an hour because Smith is willing to pay $2 an hour? So then I should pay $2 an hour, and then maybe they would pay $3, and then it isn't an auction. And if that's where we are as people, then we're just chasing dollars, and it's like that movie Office Space. You can only get somebody to work just hard enough, to do something. And that's not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is somebody who wants to get it done, who wants to see Berg successful 5 years, 10 years. If you're an 18-year-old kid coming in here working, I want you to want Berg to be successful for 40 years so that you're at the point where you're retiring and something has happened that's been great. Mm-hmm. And you've made it the whole way, and you're going to be able to retire and do whatever it is you want to do because you made enough money along the way, and we supported you, and you got to have an enjoyable career that you valued, that we valued you. And if we can do that, we all won. Yeah. And it's great. And it is something I've started to really look at as Tracy feeds me resumes. Like, I looked at one today. Guy's been at like 22 jobs in like 5 years. Like, Trace, I don't even need to look at it. Like, I don't know what he's chasing, but he hasn't found it and he's not going to find it here because I don't have it. What I need is somebody who wants to find a home and wants to be here, and if we find that, to Ford's point, then it works, right? Because you're coming to work to do the right thing, to get the job done, to do it. And if we can do that, we fall right in line with our culture, and I think everything's good.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention how, I think it probably goes without saying, but we probably should say it. And we've got a lot of people who get it.
We got a lot of people who get it.
A lot of people who buy in. There was actually Tori put together a really cool little video about just surpassing the 20th anniversary, and not everybody, obviously, but she asked a number of people what they enjoyed about being here, or what their time here meant to them, and the number of times that people said things like the people, right, or the relationships, or the opportunities that I've been given. I just thought it was really cool. So I think it probably goes without. Maybe it goes without saying, but I thought it's worth saying.
No, it's important to say. Right, it's important. That's a great point.
We got a lot of people who get it.
We got a lot of people who get it.
Yeah,
and you know what? This funny. I the video. You shouldn't say it, right? Because it is so frustrating.
Sure.
What is it, right?
I'll know it when I see it.
Right?
As the
I mean,
Supreme Court
Aaron
said.
says that about me. Aaron, if you called Mara would say, what does Mom say? Mom says, well, Dan says, the thing and the guy with the stuff, that I've said nothing. Nobody has any idea what I'm talking about. But if you could make what was said in that video is they like it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They like it because that's it. It's the people, it's the culture, it's the feeling, it's the family, it's the wanting to get it done. It's all those things. And that's what everybody said. And like you said, I'm going to piggyback on what you said. It's not just that we have a lot of these people. It's that I usually don't talk to those people as much.
Right.
And that's what I want to stop. That was like the core of this. Like, I want to stop that. I want to talk to the people that get it, that want to be here, because they're the ones that are going to get us where we're going. They're the ones that are going to get the job done, that are going to get the job closed out, that are going to be productive,
right,
and be happy to be here. And I don't want to waste my time on people who don't, whether it's hiring, whether you're here, whether any of those things. I want to focus on the people. And if I do that, I actually think there's people here who are on the periphery of that group that would be on that group if I focused on that group. Like, I almost make it my fault. Like, if I focus on the ancillary pieces that are pulling away, then everybody else is going to focus on it too. So if you focus on the core, you know what I mean? To go back to what Ford said when he started about the core with your body, like, you could have giant arms. And if you know, the guy walking around with giant arms and he's got nothing else, you just sort of snicker, right?
You lift, bro.
You lift, bro.
Well, if you think about it, two things are happening right now. Like, the Olympic trials are happening, right? And those people are more, there used to be a term like rangy or something like that. I don't forget what it is, but like everything was in sync, right? Or you watch American Ninja Warriors, right? None of them are jacked up people. They don't have like Popeye arms, but everything
they can do stuff
sync.
that everybody can't do.
Right. And so that's the neat part, is like, if that center's clean, like, they can be able to do multiple things. That's something that we've always succeeded at here, is being able to do multiple things and not just, oh, I only do this, or, oh, I only do that. Like, that's one of our, like, things that we just do. Everybody is able to jump into so many different things. I think that's part of this too, is that, like, it's not just, oh, this or, oh, that. It's everybody, like, we'll figure it out. We'll get it done. And that's how we've got to where we are. And that's how we're going to keep going from here on out.
Yeah. And even probably you said about the other day, you were talking about, you were working out and you said about pull-ups, right?
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things, like, how strong are you? How many pull-ups can you do? That doesn't make you not strong, prove strength. But in other words, there's a correlation to be like able to do everything, like CrossFit type stuff, like Ford's talking about. That's a different build. That's you got to be a certain way to be able to do that, but it takes everybody. It's, if I like close it up for me with sports, like, one of the things I love most about football is my favorite sport, period. The thing I love most about football is there is a spot for a gigantic, not very quick person. And there's a spot for a gigantic, very fast person. And there's a spot for a very tiny person. And there's a spot for a tall person, and a spot for a person who can throw, and a spot for a person who can catch. There's spots for people who can't catch. That's why you're the safety, because you can run the field or a corner. You can run the field, but you can't catch the ball as well, right? There are spots for everybody. on a football field. And if you had all 6'8", 360-pound linemen, guess what? You wouldn't be very good. And if you had all, 6'4" wide receivers, not good. If you had a bunch of quarterbacks, not good. You know what I mean? Like, you need all the pieces.
Right.
And that's how a company is. That's how Berg is, right? Is we need guys who can do people, not guys. I say guys, I use it as a way of saying it, but we need people who can do all of these things, right? If there's not somebody checking all the hours and entering them and making sure everybody gets paid, it doesn't matter if I had every other piece. If there's not a mechanic fixing the equipment or making sure things are running, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It's not just about the one piece. And so we need so many pieces to pull in the right direction as we got bigger that became what I really think I have to focus on in the short run here, is focusing on pointing out how good we are with so many of our people and making sure they hear me say that I appreciate it. I acknowledge it. I realize what they do every day.
Yeah.
Instead of taking time to talk to the people that are on the periphery, I got to focus on making sure the people that are the core that make us go know how much we value them.
Yeah. That's probably a good place to wrap it up, I think. I feel like in my head I've got like 2 or 3 more things I could say, but I don't think that it's necessary. I think we've covered it. And I feel like that's a nice place to put a bow tie on it. So thanks for joining us today, folks. We hope you got something from this, and we hope you come back for another episode.